father, son, and house of Gucci.
In this video, we'll be reviewing and analyzing the story of Gucci's family, starting with the Gucci family background leading up to the murder. If you want to see what I, a consumer of Gucci, think of this movie, stick around to see if it's worth it. So last week I made a video on the history of Gucci, the abridged version in 10 minutes, just to give myself context and to understand what I watched when I watched it in the movie theater. Y'all should be grateful. Instead of sitting and enjoying this beautiful 3-hour wonder, I took notes in the dark movie theater in the back the entire time. I'm gonna be going through my notes today, which are in roughly chronological order to the movie. So spoiler alert, I'm going to be reviewing and revealing things that you might not want to hear. You've been warned. I also made a what I got for Christmas video not too long ago, which includes a Gucci unboxing. So go down to the description and title card above to see both of these videos that I just mentioned. Before we go into the movie itself, I wanted to give a brief history of the family itself, the real family. But if you want to skip to the movie review, I will also leave the movie review / analysis portion timestamp in the description if you want to skip directly to that. But please, if you want to hear about it, you gotta listen to the history part, so please stick around. In 1969, Giorgio, the son of Aldo, had sparked the first family feud by launching a Gucci boutique on his own, which was finally reabsorbed in the family in 1972. It's interesting because in the House of Gucci movie, there was only one son that broke off and created another Gucci brand, which was not accepted because Gucci wanted everything to be centralized as one brand. And Paolo and Giorgio making two of these would be not part of the central brand. So this is kind of something that the House of Gucci movie never explained or talked about. During the 1980s, Paolo Gucci, the son of Aldo, tried to launch the brand Gucci Plus on his own, and Aldo was criticized for developing the most international business under Gucci America. To me, I can understand why that would be criticized because that gives him the most control. To ease drama, they consolidated the company and became publicly traded. However, the company would not be publicly owned until Investcorp swooped in, which would be later. In May of 1983, Rodolfo died. The infamous Maurizio Gucci inherited his father's majority stake in the company and launched a war against his uncle Aldo for full control of Gucci, which is pretty greedy. Maurizio then took over the company with the help of Demencio de Sol, who represented the Gucci family. In 1986, Aldo Gucci, at 81 years old, with only 18.7% of Gucci, was sentenced to a year in prison for tax evasion. In 1988, Maurizio Gucci sold almost 48.8% of Gucci then to Investcorp, which was a Bahrain-based investment fund. And they also owned Tiffany's at that point. And then Maurizio himself held the other 50%. So basically at this point, he owned 50% and Investcorp almost owned as much as him. So Maurizio hired Don Mello to put Gucci back on track. Then from 1991 to 1993, Gucci's finances were still very bad because Maurizio was blamed for spending extravagant amounts on the company's headquarters in Florence and Milan. In the movie House of Gucci, Maurizio was cited as spending millions of dollars into his personal needs, such as a Ferrari here, a yacht there, all these things which he said were attributed back to company expenses. Investcorp eventually bought the remaining 50% of Guccio Gucci SPA from Maurizio Gucci in 1993, thus ending the family's ties whatsoever into the group, and at that point, Guccio Gucci was no longer owned by any member of the Gucci family and totally washed from their hands. Which is kind of sad, because now that means Hermès is the only family-owned business left that is luxury. In March of 1995, Maurizio was shot dead, murdered in the lobby of Gucci's Milan office by his ex-wife, Patrizia Reggiani, who then served 16 years in jail for hiring the hitman for the murder. In November 2019, Ridley Scott announced House of Gucci, a movie about the Gucci dynasty with Lady Gaga playing Patrizia Reggiani and Adam Driver playing Maurizio Gucci. One thing I noticed from the movie is that they were shopping in Vittorio Emanuele Gallerias in Milan, Italy, which is a huge open-air shopping plaza, and I know this area particularly well because of my architectural background. I recently studied this project as a precedent project, and it is an amazing project because it is like the Crystal Palace. There is a glass vaulted enclosure that covers the shopping malls that nest inside of these access corridors that intersect. And in each of these corridors is lined with streets of luxury stores, which in the movie, Maurizio and Patrizia went shopping there. Another interesting thing I found was that Rodolfo thought Patrizio was a gold digger. Sounds like Rodolfo may or may not have been right, and why I say may not is possibly because once you get used to a particular lifestyle, even if you weren't a gold digger or someone who was looking for that kind of money at the beginning, people can become accustomed to inflated lifestyles of spending more, and so then you may become so used to spending so much money that to you it seems like a necessity, and it's hard to part ways with spending that much money. So she may or may not have been what Rodolfo claims. In the movie, Maurizio was seen wearing aviator glasses, which is actually very accurate to Maurizio in the family of Gucci, because you can see he's wearing aviator glasses as well. So they actually modeled him based off the actual person, after which point they got married. Then, some point during then, Aldo and Rodolfo Gucci, who were the elders, started talking about how the Japanese were their big target clients and joked that he was practicing his Japanese for the Japanese stores they were opening. This is actually an accurate depiction of how Gucci was, because in the video that I covered last week, if you watched the History of Gucci video, you'll see that they actually did open a store in Asia that was first Japan and then Hong Kong and then other Asian areas. Someone in the movie was also seen wearing the horsebit Gucci loafers, which is a very iconic Gucci item, as I've mentioned in the video from last week. There was a lot of smoking involved movie, which is so European. They were even smoking indoors. When I've heard American people talk about European people, one of the most stereotypical things a European person can do is smoke indoors. And that's what they do a lot in this movie. There was also a bag on one of the shelves in the stores which looked like the Gucci Silver bag because it had a chain running down the center of the front flap of the bag, and the bag itself was a flap style bag that was squarish in shape with a top handle, which is reminiscent of the Gucci Silver bag, which I'll insert a photo. Maurizio was also shown himself with a Gucci GG belt, but also in the movie you see other family members wearing other Gucci items like mentioned before, the loafers. Patrizia herself would wear Gucci monogrammed clothing. She would eventually also carry the Gucci bamboo bag and other Gucci bags, and at the airport, Aldo and Paolo Gucci would carry Gucci luggage. You could tell because there was a vertical stripe running down the center that had the Gucci colors on it. Initially, I thought there was too many flashes of the family wearing Gucci, but it was actually accurate because the family itself, but someone in the family actually said that they took pride in wearing Gucci, and that's mainly what they wore, mainly wear their own brand, which to me is like claps for loyalty. Then the scene switches at one point in the movie to the fortune teller Kina, who's kind of become Patrizia's friend, to wear only red and green and some other colors for good luck. But it made me wonder if this was an inside joke from the writers and the movie director, poking fun of the fact that the Gucci logo is actually those colored stripes. But it also made me wonder, is this also a foreshadowing to something later to happen in the movie? Hint, hint. As Patrizia gets more demanding, she starts trying to push out family, and this becomes a down spiral of very toxic events for the relationship between them. Where initially it was a very beautiful romance, it starts to devolve into her trying to control Gucci through Maurizio, and Maurizio actually doesn't want to do anything to his family. He's okay with everything where it is now, even though the family is actually in trouble at this point because they have way too many frivolous, random things that they're selling. So when Maurizio doesn't agree to oust Paolo, Patrizia goes behind his back to manipulate Paolo to expose Aldo Gucci, his father, for tax evasion. And he actually does it because Patrizia convinces him that she can help him gain his own fame and wealth. Paolo stabbed his father in the back, and his father actually went to jail for a few years. But it was also really bad because Paolo, who stabbed his father in the back, got stabbed in the back again by Maurizio and Patrizia. Patrizia said he could start his own brand and such, such, and he started the brand Gucci Plus, and they sued him for taking the Gucci name to create something else that he wasn't supposed to. They wanted him to remain in the sphere of Gucci, even though Patrizia had promised him that he could do something else. Actual fashion history, Paolo did actually create Gucci Plus, but one of their other brothers actually did as well, and he also did not succeed. At this point, Paolo was dragged away and kicking and screaming. There's another scene that became notable in that Patrizia became very jealous of Maurizio's friend Paula, or was it Pauline, for hitting on her boyfriend. The movie portrayed it as Mauricio's longtime friend. In the actual events of family relationships, Patrizia introduced her friend Paula or Pauline to Maurizio, but in the movie it was portrayed as the opposite. Initially, I couldn't understand why she was doing that. It just seemed so jealous of her to do that, when prior to that scene we hadn't seen Maurizio hitting on Paula or Pauline at all, so it didn't make sense. When an American girl breaks up with someone, she chows down on a pint of ice cream. Yet, in the movie House of Gucci, Paolo was sad, so he said he made love to chocolate gelato. That was the most Italian thing ever. At a certain point, this came to be too much for Maurizio. He just cut ties with his wife, and then he went out with Paula or Pauline, the blonde friend who Patrizia was very jealous about at the ski lift scene. Then it clicked and it made sense why she was so jealous and telling her to back off her husband, because they must have had mutual feelings for each other in the background at this point. In the real story of Patrizia and Maurizio was for a long time unsatisfied with their marriage, but he never actually asked for a divorce or separation. But after he met her friend Pauline or Paula, he asked for a separation, and then he promptly married her friend, which I don't know if that would be you, but if it was me and someone I loved did that to me, oh, you can bet that there would be shots fired. I would have a vendetta against him, which is exactly what she decided to do. Patrizia wrote in a notebook, vendetta, and through their separation phase, he would proceed to date her and do other things, if you know what I mean. So this vendetta was a foreshadowing to what would happen later. It was such a heartbreaking thing, this portion of the movie, to watch, to see everything that was built up in the first half of the movie start to come crumbling down and disaster arose, and watch them go through the divorce and separation. Because even though Maurizio at this point was marrying Paula or Pauline, a part of me wanted him to be with Patrizia still, but I do recognize that she was very toxic to the relationship. The start of this was the transformation as well of Maurizio into a dick. Patrizia initiated this ambition in him that he never had, but Maurizio was the one to end everything, because he would then sabotage both his family as well as his professional life. One, by not even seeing his kids for over 2 weeks, because Patrizia would show up to his door late one night and ask him to go see their kids, which he hadn't seen in over 2 weeks. He also started to turn his back on his family by having Investcorp take over Paolo's and Aldo Gucci's shares, which then they would own roughly 50%, and Maurizio owning a little more than that, so he would be the majority stakeholder. But using Investcorp as a tool to betray his family eventually came back and bit him in the butt. Karma came back, and Investcorp decided that they wanted to take his position away from him because he wasn't doing well even after they launched a very successful new designer. The funny thing is that they were describing this designer in such detail, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was Tom Ford, and I was right. They introduced Tommy Ford, which if you watched the video from last week, you would know the significance of why he was so important. So go watch that video after this video. Watch this video to the end first. For Gucci, Tom Ford was a lifesaver, much like what Karl Lagerfeld was to Chanel. The movie portrayed Tom Ford as having started during Mauricio's reign and having gained success, but in reality, the success of Tom Ford didn't actually come about until after Maurizio left. So I believe that was just part of the movie's interpretation to move to success earlier to when Maurizio was still around. This was a really hard part of the movie to watch because Patrizia was so desperate and heartbroken, and eventually her sadness started to lead to hate. The murder. In total desperation and anger, Pina suggests that Patrizia hire a hitman, and then they kill Maurizio in broad daylight. What? If I was an Italian grandmother, I would only have one word to describe this. Idiotto! It's one thing to murder someone with a gun that you didn't silence, but it's another thing to murder someone with a gun in broad daylight. Overall, I really enjoyed the movie. As a fashion history geek and a buyer of design and fashion, I loved all the high street references that they put for those who could understand the context behind things, such as Karl Lagerfeld, Anna Wintour, Tom Ford, and the Gucci items being shown in the background. I was very overly heartbroken and really rooted for the main couple. I didn't really like Paula because she felt like she was kind of a bit of a home wrecker in that sense, even though she wasn't technically. But you couldn't deny that Patrizia was very toxic in the relationship to Maurizio, and he became a worse person after that. So Maurizio wasn't good either because he abandoned his kids, and he did so for his wife's friend. So anyone could really understand why she'd want to kill him, but most people wouldn't actually do it. Most people, you know, would probably just put a few holes into their Xbox or toss their things out of the house. If you're feeling very Gucci about this video, give this video a like down below. Follow me on Instagram here and on my Patreon as well, which I've linked in the description bar. If you want more couture, style, and analysis like we did in this video, then go down, like, and subscribe, and turn on the notifications to get your weekly CSA PSA Hot of the Press weekly. Also, shop my closet on Depop, Mercari, and Poshmark in the description as well. Check out the videos I've linked here next of the history of Gucci that I did last week and my most recent video. And until next time, bye!